Dateline NBC tonight.
An American hero comes home. Captain Scott O'Grady in his first primetime interview. You have 9 lives, according to your family reputation.
Yeah, but I think this one counts for at least 6.
We can't get enough of his story, the downing of his jet, days in hiding, and dramatic rescue.
You wouldn't believe how long seconds last, let alone minutes and hours and days when you want things to happen.
We've reveled in his return home. Tonight, a look at the human behind the hero. Your family says you're a dreamer, you dream big dreams.
Yeah.
Can I ask what your next big dream is?
You might know a better way to do it, but you're here to learn our way.
It's the training course that helped Captain O'Grady survive.
It's called blotch technique.
In 6 days, these flyers learn how to avoid capture, keep warm, and find food, including bugs.
He doesn't want to be eaten.
We know how Scott O'Grady did. How would you do? Josh Mankiewicz reports.
You're in a rush. You grab a payphone. Then you get the bill.
I couldn't believe it. I got a bill for $9.90 for that call.
Why some payphones charge 8 times what you're used to paying. And how you can protect yourself.
Making a payphone call is like playing a slot machine.
The hidden costs of calling home. Elizabeth Vargas with a Dateline investigation.
They had a love, the kind few will ever know, until one day, the man who fought fires for a living came face to face with a backdraft.
I see you can be all right. He goes, yeah, I'm going to make it, don't worry.
And together, they began a struggle that will touch your heart. Fred Francis with a story of everlasting love.
Plus, peak performance, Dateline's picture of the week.
Dateline with Jane Pauley and Stone Phillips, plus Tom Brokaw, Katie Couric, Bryant Gumbel, and Maria Shriver. Dateline continues after this brief message. Dateline is sponsored in part by New York Life.
Search and Rescue moves to its regular night and time. Each week brings all new action based on their real-life rescues.
The fire has jumped the ridge. Evacuate.
Get out.
We can't still be alive in there.
Going down.
The premiere of High Sierra Search and Rescue, Wednesday at 8/7 Central on NBC. He got them pregnant so he could sell their babies. One mother stopped him.
I'm not leaving here without my daughter.
A Moment of Truth movie, Cradle of Conspiracy, NBC Monday.
From our studios in New York, here is Jane Pauley.
Good evening. We'll have our exclusive interview with Air Force Captain O'Grady, the first in primetime since his rescue and return to the United States, a little bit later. But first, some information that could save you money. Pick up your phone at home and you generally know how much a call is going to cost you. Pick up a payphone, use a calling card, and in some cases you're virtually playing a slot machine. Some payphones charge up to 8 times what you're used to paying for long-distance calls. And you'll probably never know it until you get your bill. Some of it's legal, some of it's not. But now more than ever, as Elizabeth Vargas tells us in this Dateline investigation, reach out and you could be ripped off.
It was a terrible snowstorm, and I used the payphone at McDonald's to call and check that my friend had also made it home.
I was in Wyoming. I had to respond to a page that I got from my office, and so I went to the nearest payphone and called.
The phone lines were down, and I went into town. I used the only pay phone there.
It was a 5-minute phone call for $9.38.
I made 8 phone calls, and the total was $86.
It was like $24.75 for 9 minutes.
Those costly charges were for payphone calls made to people just a few hundred miles away, and all were made with the same long-distance company.
It was ONCOR.
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 ONCOR. You may not know the name, but the company says it's so large that in some areas it is second only to AT&T in providing long-distance service on payphones.
May I have the area code and number you wish to call, please?
In fact, ONCOR handles hundreds of thousands of calls from its 200,000 payphones every day. Its payphones are located in places like shopping centers, restaurants, bars, and gas stations. And when you're at one of them, you'll be paying ONCOR's higher rates for long-distance calls, when you dial 0 for a collect call, or even when you use certain calling cards from other phone companies. But how would you even know if you're using an ONCOR phone? The only surefire way is to listen to this bong
ONCOR
when making your call.
Using one of their phones. You might get charged 3 times the AT&T rate. If you knew that on the spot, you'd probably raise hell. But you don't know it until your phone bill comes a couple months later.
If callers aren't familiar with ONCOR, these 10 consumer advocates are. The call would have been $8?
$8.09.
But ONCOR charged
$26.98.
In a 3-month Dateline investigation, we made dozens of identical phone calls using ONCOR, AT&T, MCI, and Sprint. Here's what we found. A call from California to New York. AT&T charged $1.02. ONCOR, $8.53. A call within New York on Sprint, $2.30. On ONCOR, $8.53. A call from New York to LA, AT&T, $4.50. ONCOR, $19.64. How many of you here have had complaints about a company called ONCOR? Nearly everyone. These people, admittedly pro-consumer, say unlike home phones, where deregulation led to lower prices, certain long-distance payphone rates have skyrocketed. Deregulation is supposed to lead to increased competition, which is supposed to lead to lower prices for consumers. Are you telling me this isn't happening in this industry?
This is like competition in reverse. I've had lots of consumers say, in effect to me, if this is competition, give me monopoly back.
ONCOR is owned by Ronald Hahn. He wouldn't talk with Dateline, and since ONCOR is privately held, its profits are not public knowledge. But Greg Casey, a senior vice president with the company, did tell us ONCOR has annual revenues of about $250 million.
I feel totally justified in charging what we charge. We are charging according to our costs, and we don't make, as a percentage, any higher than AT&T.
ONCOR says its costs are higher because it pays fees to an independent sales force and commissions to payphone owners. So, for example, when an ONCOR phone is located in a restaurant, the restaurant owner gets a fee for every ONCOR call made on that phone. And those costs are passed on to you, the consumer. But ONCOR also charges for time that other companies don't. When we asked ONCOR's operators for rate information which is supposed to be free, we were illegally charged for that time. For example, when we made a call that lasted 4.5 minutes, ONCOR charged us for 8 minutes. Another call that lasted 9.5 minutes, ONCOR charged us for 12 minutes. When do you start billing me?
We start billing you from the time it hits the network, which would be... I'm
asking you, what is that?
It would include the ring time.
So you're charging me during the time that the telephone rings, maybe 5-10 times?
You know what? I'm going to have to go back and check that.
Casey later told us that they do indeed charge for ring time. But Dateline isn't alone in its findings. In 1994, after getting complaints, Illinois started its own investigation, and it too found ONCOR mistimed calls.
The state of Illinois used a stopwatch. They incorrectly timed the calls.
Jim Ryan, the state attorney general, disagrees, and he says investigators found something else.
They were charged for operator-assisted calls when, in fact, our investigation revealed that the operator didn't assist in making the call.
Illinois tried to stop ONCOR in court with a temporary restraining order, but ONCOR argued the case should be held in front of the state's utility commission and got the case dismissed. Illinois is appealing. But there's more. We also made 4 ONCOR phone calls that never went through, where no one answered. And guess what? ONCOR charged us nearly $10 for 2 of those calls.
We don't bill for uncompleted calls.
We were charged for 2 phone calls that never went through. Rang and rang, but nobody answered.
How many times did they ring?
You told me a moment ago you don't charge for calls that don't go through.
If you're going to let the phone ring 20 times, okay, you're incurring a cost on our network. And in some cases, we would charge for that call.
According to the Federal Communication Commission's payphone regulations, ONCOR should never knowingly charge us for calls that do not go through. But if it does go through, it is legal to charge for ring time. However, companies like AT&T, Sprint, and MCI do not charge for ring time. So what can a consumer do? The FCC says you can call a company first to check its rates, or you can do something called dial around. For example, if you dial AT&T's access code or 800 number, you can bypass a carrier you don't know and use one whose rates are familiar to you. So if you know how to dial around, you can save money. But if you don't know how to dial around, consumer advocates say you're being fooled into using a service like ONCOR.
I can't think of why somebody'd want to pay more when they can pay less.
Kathleen Wallman is in charge of the FCC's Common Carrier Bureau. Her office has received more complaints about ONCOR than any other carrier serving payphones.
Given the fact that neither of us can think of why somebody would pay that much more when they can pay that much less, doesn't that mean that a company like ONCOR is still in business because a lot of people are being duped?
Well, people need to take responsibility for educating themselves about the choices that a competitive market provides.
People are very aware of how they're dialing. People aren't stupid.
Why on earth would somebody choose to use a phone company that's going to charge me up to 5 times the amount another company would charge me, that's going to charge me for the ringing time that another company isn't going to charge me for? Why would they choose that?
Well, maybe they don't want to dial a couple of other digits. I mean, in some cases they have to dial 1-800-COLLECT or 1-800-CALL-AT&T, and that's too many digits. They don't want to dial it.
ONCOR says a benefit of its company is that it helps the owners of its payphones, including small businesses, by paying them commissions. But several states say it is the people making the phone calls who are paying the price. Florida fined ITI, ONCOR's predecessor, $250,000 for overcharging. Georgia ordered ITI to refund $115,000 for incorrect billing. Missouri tried to keep the company out of the state. In all, 10 states and the District of Columbia have over the years brought charges or made major complaints against ONCOR.
The FCC has taken additional action against ONCOR, ordering it to lower its rates or to prove they're just and reasonable. Next week on Dateline, our investigation continues with 2 very different faces of a long-distance company that built its reputation on saving you money.
Coming up.
Copy that, you're alive.
The hero all of